Hi, before I start this demo, I'd just like to apologize for the lack of lots of little bits of music that I normally do, try and do some cool stuff with the machine. But as you'll see during the recording of this, it broke, so it's a bit useless at the minute. So I didn't get a chance to add I was going to do some nice Prince tracks and stuff like that. So I apologize that the only track I've got is the Tears for Fears that doesn't even use the internal sounds that are on this that I used on the previous video. That's all you're going to hear is a little demo track coming up in a second at the very intro. But yeah, a shame. You'll see halfway through, as I was playing this, it kept on selecting the ride symbol, which just means that editing it and using it became impossible. So it's on its way back. Don't let that put you off. All the others have had an awful lot of machines from Behringer, and this is the first one I've had that's died or done something really tragic on me. All the others have been okay, but maybe not a reflection on the machines in total. But honest reviews as ever. So that's what happened to this one. Anyway, enjoy. What we have here is the LM drum from Behringer, and as you're no doubt already aware, it's Behringer's take or remake, or let's call it a modern interpretation of the principles of the LinnDrum. And in case you don't know what all the fuss is about, the LinnDrum, the LM1 was super exclusive, super expensive machines back in the day. I think there was only 500 LM1s ever made, so it was out of the reach of mere mortals. And it really was the king of the 80s. The 909 and the 808, although they were made in the 80s, they sort of came into their own in the 90s. In the 80s, the LinnDrum was king. It was used by almost everyone: Madonna, Phil Collins, Michael Jackson, Tears for Fears, Peter Gabriel, Yam Hammer, Wham. Essentially, everybody and anybody making music that went into a professional studio had access to a LinnDrum. It was just ubiquitous, and it was on thousands and thousands of hit records. And back then, it wasn't the only digital drum machine to use samples stored on EEPROMs. Sequential had the Drumtrax, EMU had the Drumulator, Oberheim had the DMX, and all were vying for that LinnDrum space. And if you're even vaguely familiar with any of the early Prince albums, you'll know the Linn sound was part of his signature sound. Detuning using the separate outputs, sticking things through phases is all over like 1999 and the Purple Rain album. And I've already made this video demoing the big differences between this and standard samplers, which you may have already seen. If not, I'll leave a link in the description. But in brief, the LinnDrum uses variable sample rate digital to audio converters, and that means when it pitches down, it varies the sample rate, not just interpolates between the points or whatever. However, modern samplers do that. But what the variable sample rate does is it creates all this lovely, crunchy top end that you don't get when you're just pitching down in a standard way. But do check that video out because I explain it in much more detail in that. And here's another cool little trick it does that's based on the LinnDrum that I didn't put in that previous video. That's hi-hats playing 16ths. And they all sound slightly different, and that's because it uses different start points in each of the samples. So if you look at this here, we've got this weird little bit at the start, which is quite handy on each of the samples to see that it's a different length. It's slightly different for each one. So this is the same sample, but it's played slightly differently. It gives that human feel. So if I play below, that's just the first one of these repeated. That's what you get with a standard sampler or a standard drum machine. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. I have tried it with the snares and it doesn't do with the snares. Here's the snare roll on the 16th, and that's one of the samples again, just repeated. Sounds the same. So yeah, this hi-hat trick is really quite neat, isn't it? And then quickly, another thing someone asked me to check out was, does the snare have like a 10 millisecond delay? Apparently on the original, people say it had like a 10 millisecond gap before the start of the sample, which gave it a bit of a swing. This is the snare and a kick played together in a pattern, and you can see the snare is actually coming in slightly before the kick. And so no, essentially it doesn't do the 10 millisecond thing, if that is a thing. So yeah, it's very much based on the LinnDrum, but it does have the sounds from the Drumtrax. I think it's the DMX. It's got Simmons SDS in there as well, and I've loaded into this one some drumulator sounds. So you can have a fair few of those classic 80s 12-bit digital drum machines in this at any one time. For this product, Behringer purchased Tears for Fears well-toured LinnDrum and effectively reverse engineered it using the data from the EEPROMs rather than sampling the sounds. And like the original, it's 16 voice. We've got individual outputs on the back for all 16, plus USB MIDI 5-pin DIN, and 3 trigger outputs, which are assignable, so you can use any of the 16 tracks as a trigger. The interface is reminiscent of the LinnDrum, but it's not identical, obviously. On the right-hand side, we've got individual level and pan controls for each of the 16 sounds, plus we've got the metronome control here. We've got these little buttons here which select the different tones and show you which ones you're editing. Here's the editing window there. We can see that changing slightly as I select different tracks. And we've also got these knobs for tuning of the snare and rim, the high, mid and low toms, plus congas and hi-hat decay as well. So the right-hand side's very much LinnDrum, except on the top we've got the Behringer Wave Designer and the filter. This can be high pass or low pass. If you've used the TD8 or the TD9, you'll be very, very familiar with all this. And because we can sample on this, we've got an input level as well as a volume. On the left is the main control center, which is a complete departure from the original, obviously. And again, if you've used the TD8 or the TD9, you'll get to grips with the sequencer pretty quickly. This is based on the fundamentals of the TD8 and the TD9, just taking it a little bit further because we've got a lot more drum engines in here. And finding your way around the menu system's pretty simple, using a combination of these buttons here, menu buttons, scroll through, click yes or no. Go back up the menu using the no button or select something using the yes button, all pretty simple. Let's take a look at how you use it then. We'll start off on the left-hand side along the top. We've got MIDI options for 5-pin DIN, MIDI options for USB, so transmit, receive, forward to USB, etc. Then we've got some sync options, internal MIDI USB trigger. We can accept trigger inputs, and we've got trigger rates from 48 down to 1, so 1, 2, 4, 24 and 48. So there's loads of ways of connecting this up with other analog kit. Then we've got a randomization. You can pick which of the voices is randomized on which step. Step repeat. This is repeating a step. So if we trigger that when we're playing, so did pick a step with nothing on it at that point. Yeah, we can repeat more than one step, so. Then we've got note repeat as well. Note repeat will trigger whatever voice you've got selected. Let's select the snare. So again, 1, 2, 4, or 8. Essentially, it's ratcheting, isn't it? We've got an autofill, and the trigger will play whatever's being selected down here. The tap tempo menu, if we click on tap, let's just come out of there for a second. If we look down the bottom of the right hand of the screen, we've got the tempo. We've got the swing, which is 50, which is off at the minute. Then we've got probability of 100 and Flam of 22. We can change that. Let's put the Flam up. Let's put up to, well, let's just change it to 20, for example. If we go tap and then probability, we can change that from 0 to 100. And then finally, we've got the swing amount as well. So we could turn the swing up. That's positive or negative swing. So pushing or dragging. I'll show how all that works in a minute when we come into the menu system, but effectively you set a probability, a main global probability, and you can switch that global probability on or off per step, per voice, same with the Flam. So coming over to the left here, save, copy, erase, and dump. I'll show those later once I've created a pattern. And then these are really super important because it puts you in whichever mode you need to be in for whatever you're doing. So you pick a song. We've got song 3 here. There's 2 songs that are full of 16 beats. So if we play this one, I don't know what's in it. Pattern. So they're patterns within the song. So we've got 8 songs, sorry, not 16. So you can pick 8 songs, and each of those 8 songs can have 16 patterns in them. So let's go back to what I was playing earlier. So it's song 3, pattern 1, one I programmed in. Step mode takes you into actually programming the steps, and pads allows you to play the pads. So you use step mode for inputting steps in step mode. So in step mode there, and this is looking at the bass. So there's the bass, and you can see it's flashing there or off. So we've got on, which is the louder one, flashing, which is the quieter one. What am I talking about when I say that? Well, if we go back into the pads, you can see we've got bass kick 1 and 2. 1 is quieter than 2. On the snare, we've got 3, 2, 1. So although these pads are touch sensitive, by default, it's set up like the LinnDrum, so different velocity or volumes on different pads. So we've got the hi-hat and then the ride as well, which is the way they allowed you to, you know, put stuff in. Let's go to percussion actually. So it's the way the LinnDrum allowed you to do things with volume changes per tone, which we do on velocity now really easily. But yeah, so percussion mode, hit the percussion mode, and we're looking at the capacitor, tambourine, congas. And if we're in and the cowbell and claps. If we're not in percussion mode, it's hi-hat, toms and rides. So percussion mode is going to be congas, and we can see these changing over there on the voice select buttons. So that's how you select and play things. So if we come back to this, if we look at the hi-hat, for example, this is quite interesting because we've got a hi-hat which is closed, and this is red, and a hi-hat that's open, and that's white. And that's because they use the same sample, but on the open hat, you've just got a longer envelope. We can change the decay over here. That's making the closed one more floppy. But doesn't change the open one. So we've got 16 pads, but they don't relate exactly to the 16 instruments because we've got the different velocity levels or volume levels. So if you're wondering, if we go into step mode and we play the kick, so the kick, that's velocity 1 or 2, so the louder one, and that's the quieter one. And that's off, like we said before. If we go into the snare, we've got 3 velocity layers, so that's loudest, press it again, number 2, press it again, quick flash is number 1. And whatever you've got selected here is whatever you trigger with the trigger button. And as you saw earlier, these select the note repeat as well. But it's handy having these, the voice select buttons and these, because when you're in step mode, you can't be selecting the instruments. You select the instruments over here on the right. Okay, hopefully that's all making sense. I'll take you through to the menu now. On the menu system, we go back through the menu using no, and forward through the menu using either yes or click on this. So let's come back. I'll just show you what we've got in there. So step size, this is effectively the rate at which it's playing, 8 triplets 16ths. So that's 8s, 16ths. Come back. Probability, like I said, so we can change the probability per step, per instrument. So you turn it on or off. The global probability setting is set using the tap and knob function. You can't change the amount of probability per step. Flam, again, let's have a look at that. So let's put a flam on a snare. So let's put it on to 5. You heard it there, we weren't following the steps there. This is a 32 step bar. If we come into length, we can see we've got a pattern length of 32, auto scroll, and now it'll scroll through it while we play it. There you go. Now we've moved over to the next one. We go to the side stick, you can see that. There we go. So coming back into the menu, note repeat, we can do exactly the same there. So you can put the note repeat on or off for each of the steps. Let's maybe go to the bass. So we'll put note repeat on. We'll put it on. Let's put 8 onto step 1, shall we? There they are. So there's your ratchets. Polymeter, we don't have to have all voices having the same amount of steps per bar. You can see here I've played with the snare having just 5. Let's turn that on using the forward button. So now the snare will only have 5 steps. Cool. Well, that's what that does. And then we come back to the filter. Now, this is quite cool. So, well, it's all quite cool, I suppose. Filter auto on. Let's turn that on like we do with the Polymeter. See, this is flashing here. What have I selected for the filter? I've selected those. Let's play it. And you can hear there that I've been twiddling with the filter. You can record that using the knob itself, or you can change them individually. If we just do something else, let's do it with the knob itself, shall we? So that should have changed, and it has. Back and into the preferences. So whether things are per pattern or global. So probability is set a pattern, Flam set per pattern, etc. Filter and filter onto global. All the things are set to global. I'm not going to go through everything in there. MIDI map, you've got MIDI mapping of loads of stuff in there, so I won't go into that either. That's what the manual's for. Trigger assign, this is cool. On the back, we've got the 3 trigger outputs. They're set to cabasa, tambourine, or cowbell at the minute, so you can change them to anything else. So any sound that you're not using, you can use as a trigger, or you can use that track as a trigger, or you can use a sound you're using anyway. Bitcrusher, everything's set to 12-bit, but we can change the rate from 12 down to 1 on each of the sounds. On the kick here, let's turn the filter off. Turn that down, so click, and it. So yeah, you can go really crunchy if that's your thing, which it is mine quite often. Back out the menu, press no, metronome, settings, how many beats it plays or beeps to, and there's your metronome volume on the far right. Then various options. This is where you've got the velocity sensitivity of the pads. I've got it turned off at the minute. It is by default. Do chromatic MIDI inputs as well. Here I've got it in chromatic mode and velocity sensitivity is on. I don't know if that has to be on actually, if it's coming through a keyboard. No, it doesn't have to be. Anyway, what I wanted to show you here is that we do have chromatic mode. That seems to be working just fine. Each of the tones has got its own MIDI channel. So MIDI channel 2 is a snare. MIDI channel 3 is the side stick. Not velocity sensitive, whereas the snare is. Hi-hats. Yeah, that is. What about the open hat? So as I go through, I have found some like the kick, the snare, and the closed hat, but yeah, it seems a bit random. Most don't seem to be. So go back to the kick. Definitely velocity sensitive. So whether that's a bug, I don't think I'm setting this up not to send velocity. If I did, I can't remember doing that, but something worth checking out. As I say, possibly a little bug there. So a fair amount of options in that menu. So we're getting somewhere. So we've looked at length, and this sets the length of the pattern. So you can have up to 64, and then you'd select. So we're on 32 at the minute. If we select 3, it's now 19 out of 32, 18 out of 32, 17, or full 32. It's all shown in the top right. Go to sample. This is where we sample something. I'm not going to sample anything today. You've got your input there. You sample it, and then you change the start and end points. It records it in as 24 kilohertz, 12-bit. So just like the samples on the LinnDrum. And then this is the bit I really wanted to get to, is the banks. So in the banks, we've got 16 banks, and each of these banks contains the samples. So it comes with the LinnDrum, the LM-1, the LM-900 or the Linn900, DT, which I think is Drumtrax, SDS, which is Simmons, and TMC. I think that might be the DMX, I'm not 100% sure. But if we play this, this is a little Dorothy Parker from Prince. Let's take that Flam off, shall we? So we go to the menu, go to the Flam, snare 5, take it off. Back to the banks. Then the final one is all on default, and I've already put some from the drum emulator into bank 8. And this is quite interesting the way this is set up, because each of these banks is effectively like a separate drum machine, and everything that you change in the bank, so all these settings that you can set for the sounds in the bank is stored in the bank, not in the pattern. So the banks are actually quite important. The bank, I see them as being like a separate drum machine almost. So it's like you've got the LinnDrum, the LM2, the LM-900, the Drumtrax, and all the parameters on each of those drum machines are set for that drum machine, not per pattern, and there's no way of saving a kit. So what do I mean by that? It sounds really complex. So let's go back into the patterns. Now, I've got the level, what we're on there, that's the snare. So there's the level of the snare. We've got the level here, which is like the live level, that never changes. If you turn that down, and you move to another pattern, the snare will still not be playing, because this is still, like the live settings in there, the level here is a percentage of that level, basically. So to make sure the levels are exactly what you want, if you're changing from track to track and bank to bank, you could set all these at 100% and then change the levels within the bank itself, within the drum machine itself. But let's just alter that. Is that the snare we're on there? So let's alter the level of that snare on this. We'll come to the next one. That's another bank I've got in there, and the snare's loud on that one. This all sounds quite complicated, and it took me a little while to get my head around it. But if I put the same bank, so the same drum machine, onto pattern 3, so let's copy this pattern. So copy 1, copy, and we're going to copy it to pattern 3. So press copy again. So pattern 3 should be the same as pattern 1. And it is. But if we change the level of this sample in pattern 3, it's changed it in 1 because it used the same bank. But one that's not on that bank, channel 2, if we change that one, this is using the LM1, not the LinnDrum. Go to another one. So it saves it per bank, not per pattern. That's what I'm trying to get across here. Possibly quite clumsily. So this one's using the LM-900 or the Linn900. So to set this up before, this is me trying to work out exactly how this all sits together, basically. So the banks are really important. It's not just like you've got 16 banks of patches. Each of the banks holds all the values for that bank. Then quantize menu, and you can quantize each of the instruments. You can quantize the global setting is with this knob here, the D, which is dial, and T for the tempo. I thought that was triplets and dotted. I was getting myself really confused, but it's not. Mute and solo do you might expect. So mute. So with the mute, the solo, the note repeat and the step fill, you know, there's plenty of nice little things to be playing with in there. Let's create a pattern then. We'll go to song 4, pattern 9. I know this is empty. Let's set the length for that. So we could set it to 32, 48, 64, but we'll keep it at 16 for now to keep things nice and simple. We saw auto scroll before and we'll leave that off. Well, we don't need it if we're only using 16 steps. So let's, we're on step now. So we'll put a kick on the first. I don't know. Let's do something like that. And what did I do wrong there? I did this wrong with the TD9 when I first got it. You need to press record, otherwise you just play in the pads. Yeah, let's put it onto the kick. Oh, losing my mind. Okay. So making them louder or quieter. Let's turn that ride off. Let's put a loud one there and a quiet one there. All very obvious stuff. Let's put it onto the open hat. Closed hat. Side sticks, I don't know. And it's that simple really. If we wanted to play something live, just pads. Are we on the toms? Yeah, we're not on percussive mode. Step, have a look at those rides, there they are. So really simple to do that. And to save it, we had it on 9. So now you're selecting, you're not selecting where you're going to save it to, you're selecting which one you're going to save. And this is a little bit annoying because it means that if you've done something to a beat, you can't then save it into another place. You've got to copy it across first. So save that 9, 2, and then save it. So it's saved there now. But yeah, if we wanted to save 9 to 10, so we wanted to do some little changes to it, we're now just saving pattern 10, which doesn't have anything in it. So if we go to pattern 10, nothing there. So we'd have to copy that across. So we'll go to copy, we're going to copy 9, okay, and then we're going to copy it to 10, okay, now it's there in 10. And that's it. That's how easy it is to use. Let's take a look at importing some of our own samples then. For that, you use the Synthtribe app. You can see it's recognized the drum machine. This does have a sequencer on board. So if we go to song 3, pattern 1, record, that's that little sequence I've been using there. That's a 32-step sequence. You've got mute, solo, effects, random on and off. And this is really useful because you can import and you can export. Go back into this and look at the sample menu. We can open a librarian and this shows us what we've got in there. Total drum storage available is 14.7 meg, which is 310 seconds. So it's 5 minutes 16 of sample time. So on the left, we've got all the samples that we've got in there. So there's 109 it comes with, which gets us up to, where are we? Up to here. And then these are the ones that I've put in myself after 109. So we've got the LM2, these are the different banks. You can back up and you can restore from a backup, but I don't know how you'd send a specific bank. I don't think there's a way of doing that yet. So for me to send my patrons the samples, for example, I'll just have to send the separate samples. You have to load them in yourself. So there's the ones I put in there. And to do that, you can do it as a single sample at a time. So open the WAV file. It creates a temp file for all the ones you've uploaded. I've deleted all the temp files. Maybe you shouldn't have done that. Possibly these are the 24 kilohertz 12-bit files, I don't know. But I don't think WAVs can be 12-bit, can they? So you just select your file and then you open it and then you send it. Or you can do multiple files at once, so add. So I could select all of these, open, and it adds them to the pool. Then in the librarian, you can drag any of them from the left-hand side into any of the banks. So that will be how you'd create variations on the different machines. One thing to be aware of when you're bringing samples in, though, I found that 16-bit samples that were loud ended up with a little crackle on them. That's not 12-bit crackle, that's distortion. So I've reduced all mine by between 3 and 8 dB to get them in here. If we press tap and sample, we get into the sample management. Everything with a lock on it is the initial or original samples that it came with. And they're the ones that I've put in for me. For example, if we go to the right, we can select these, select load into the various banks, delete them, trim them, rename them, all the rest of it. So that's your sample management. There's a few more bits I've not mentioned inside this menu yet. We've got distortion. So come over to that. Adds an awful lot of gain. That moves to the claps or the ride an awful lot. I don't know why it does that. Little bug. But yeah, that distortion's nice. Put on the snare as well. Let's put the sample on the snare. Don't know what I've done there. In fact, I'll show you that. So once we're in, see, it went to 8 again then, weird. Again, it's just moved to 8. If I leave it long enough, I'm not connected to anything, so I don't know why it's doing that. Is that a bug, or is it this machine's a bit knackered? Anyway, so we're going to the sample. If we twist this, we don't turn what sample, we don't change what sample we're looking at. It's gone to there again. That just opens the menu, and then we can see what samples we've got in here. So we've got 2 kicks and we've got 2 snares. So kick will be, it's driving me mad now. So snare, I'm going to stop demoing that bit because that's really annoying me. Okay, so let's try this again. Do it again. What I was trying to show is if you twist this knob, you go into this menu and you see what you've got in here. What you've got in here is 2 kicks and 2 snares, but you don't have the alternate samples. It would be nice to have them. But then again, you can just load your own, which I've done, which maybe that's part of the fun of it. But I really can't demo what I was going to do, which was the looping. If we go into the snare, we loop it. If we go into the sample itself, we can see where the loop point is. But now it's showing you the ride again. So there we go. Back to the ride. Okay, I think this is going to have to go back. Luckily for you, these are bits I'm doing the following day, so I've actually done the rest of the demo. I was just doing some extra little bits there. Yeah, but that's a shame. So I think this will have to go back because that's been getting worse and worse, and now it's doing it all the time. It's made it unusable. So unfortunately, hope that doesn't reflect on all the other instruments out there. But yeah, this seems to be a little bit knackered, doesn't it? So we'll carry on with the rest of the review that I did yesterday, but that's really unfortunate. Never mind. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I've been using on it and that's worth noting, and I don't think I can. So there you have it, the LM drum from Behringer. That's how it all works. It's got a few quirks in there. The fact that you don't have kits to save, so every time you come to it, it's like a fresh machine, makes sense on the TD9 and the TD8. Not so much on this, I think. I think of moving from track to track and using it live, it would be nice to have kits or everything saved in the pattern, all the nod and slider positions. Whether they can do that, I've no idea. It would really be nice, actually, if these sliders here would changed from being for pan to being tuning, perhaps. So you had tuning for your kick, your snare, your side stick, your hi-hat. I know what they've done here. They've tried to recreate the LinnDrum, but I would say it would have been better to make it a little bit more flexible from the front panel as well. The back, having those outputs is great, but one little niggle I would say is that these are 3.5 outputs, so you'll need a lot of cables like this, 3.5 to 6.35 mil, or what's that, 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch. Each of these costs me probably £5, £6, £7, something like that. Even if they're just a 5 and you need 16 of them, that's £80. And you'll have a lot of these cables hanging around that you might not use all the time. It seems a little churlish complaining about having loads of outputs on the back. Just would have been nice. I don't know how much more it would have cost to do, but £80 for the cables or an extra £80 for the machine. I'd have paid the £80 for the machine, to be honest, just because I've got an awful lot of cables. But that's really minor. Other thing about the look of it, it's okay, but it doesn't work as well as the TD8 and the TD9. These side panels, I think these are plastic. They look plastic, they feel plastic. It just doesn't have that wow factor the others had when I got them out of the box. And I think that's because we've got so many of these silicone buttons on the left hand side. That's subjective, obviously. I'm trying to give a balanced view of these things. But it's a fun thing. If you like your crunchy 80s sounding drums and you want to load samples in, sample the bits and bobs, this is a lovely little thing, actually. So yeah, I hope that was of some use to somebody somewhere. If it was, please do subscribe, ring the bell, join me over on Patreon. The channel is funded by my wonderful patrons who will get access to anything I do with this. And do check out my affiliate links as well. If you are going to buy one of these, please click on one of them, because it'll cost you the same, but I'll get a little kickback. So that really does help as well. Also, take a look at my StarskeyCard.com website, patches, samples, and bits and bobs on there as well. But overall, hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for staying to the very end, and I will see you next time.